Hello and welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast series. And today's episode, well, I guess it's a little bit of a special one because we're going to look at a topic that has a particular relevance at this date that we're recording this. Now, the topic we're going to be looking at is connection. And we're recording this during an unprecedented time in the world, in that it's in the middle of the COVID coronavirus pandemic, which is affecting so many people right now. And the reason connection's even more important now is because so many people are needing to be in isolation, socially isolated from their colleagues, most certainly, often members of their family and friends. And people are reporting a sort of lack of connection, and they are missing being proximate and near other people. So it's a very interesting and useful, relevant time to examine connection. So first of all, we need just to define what we mean by connection, because it's a big concept, it's a big word, and it can be used in lots of different ways. So what do we really mean by it? Well, for this context, if we look at connection as that feeling or that sense or that essence that there's something more than just us in this universe, in this planet, in this system. And it's a feeling we have when we get a sense of something bigger than just us, that we're part of something greater. Now, that might be two people feeling a friendship, it might be a family, it might be a team, whether that's a work team or a sports team, it might be a connection to a community, an organization, or even we can connect to nature or animals or even the idea of something we can connect to our purpose. So connection really is a word to sort of to label a feeling, a sensation, an essence of there's something more than just us around. And it's really foundational, it's really fundamental, and it's almost innate to what we are, although we'll talk more about that a bit later. So it's so foundational, and if you think about it and just pause for a moment to consider it, many things that we do are all about gaining more connection or stopping connection fading. Many businesses are set up to increase the amount of connection we feel because it's such a fundamental driver for us, or you could describe it as a driver. And we even want our consumers to connect to our brands. So it's so foundational, this. Now, at the moment, what's going on in the world with the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, is we're missing some of that because our normal way of being with our friends, family or colleagues has been interrupted, has been disrupted. And we can feel more isolated, we can feel more anxious and insecure because we're not getting that sense of connection. So let's just go behind the scenes for a moment and look at connection from the view of the mind and what's really going on when we think about connection. Now, typically and normally we would attribute connection to something. So we might say, "Oh, I felt very connected with that person," and that might be because you had a shared interest. It might be you have similar views on something. It might a degree of sort of mental intimacy that you had a similar view, or emotional intimacy. You felt they got you. They felt that there was a listening and a presence, and we would often attribute that to how the other person was, or if it's a team or a community or an organization, that there's a similarity in how people see the world, and that's why you feel connected. Or it might be that we connect to an event. I'm sure you've all had experiences where there's been some event in your country that maybe has bonded the nation. So it might be a big sporting event, or a national royal wedding, or something that kind of connects people, and you can sort of feel it. I remember being in London for the Olympics in 2012, and you could walk around London and it felt more connected. It's quite strange. But the point here is that we are usually attributing connection to the way a person is, or to a thing that's going on. And it's linked to sort of feeling like they're similar mindsets, or being understood, listened, and maybe there's a lack of judgment, which often helps us with connection. Now, that sense of attributing connection to the way someone is, or the way you are, or an activity, actually, if we think about that and explore it for a moment, it's not entirely accurate, because it's also possible to feel connection regardless to whether you agree with someone, regardless to whether you share an interest with them, regardless to what's going on. And the best place to see this, as I often say with quality of mind, the best place to see this is in small children. Small children can feel that connection. You can feel it from them, and they have no judgment about things. You don't have mental intimacy with them because they don't really have any conceptual ideas for you to agree with. So you can just feel that connection, even though there's nothing really in common with what's going on. It's just there. And also you might sometimes feel, maybe when you're sitting on a bus or on a train or a plane with a stranger, you can just feel a sense of connection. You might not know much about them. You might just be chatting. You might just be have smiled at them across the way, and you can feel a bit of connection. You can feel that. Now, what's going on? If it's not to do with how we are or our shared interests or something, how can we still feel that connection? Well, here's the thing to get super curious about, and that is that connection is something that is already there. It's in our, if you like, our true nature. And actually, technically, the word connection's not accurate, because connection sort of can imply separation and joining two separate things together. Now, really, as weird as it might sound, we're already part of one thing, and that is the system, that is the mind, or that psycho-spiritual system, whatever it is, whatever you want to attribute that to, that source. We're all of it. None of us is separate from it. So actually we don't really need connection because it's already there. So what we're talking about is something blocking that pre-existing oneness, that something blocking that connection, if you like. And when that block's not there, we feel connection. And when it is there, we feel separate, isolated, and alone. So what is it that could block that pre-existing oneness or connection that's there? Now, the thing that blocks it is our own personal mind, our own conceptual mind, that creates a sense that there's an us, a self, an ego. And that, as it evolves, which is normal and natural, of course, as we get conditioned, creates a conceptualization of a self and judgments and all that thing. And that can, in moments, block our sense of connection. Because when we don't have that, for example, young children, we have a far greater sense of connection. And in moments as older children or teenagers or adults, we fall out of our conceptual mind. Our aperture is very wide to that source. We feel connected. We feel that oneness. And we don't feel though we're a separate self and there's a world out there. We actually feel all one. Now, this might sound a little abstract, a little profound, even a little woo-woo. But I would urge you to just get curious about it and see what you see, or more importantly than see what you see, feel what you feel when you notice that there's a sense of connection or warmth, around, because sometimes that's how it turns up for people sentiently, through a sort of a warmthness or a feeling of peace, that's when your conceptual mind has kind of let go for a bit. When your thinking mind, your psychological mind has let go for a bit. You might be in flow, for example. Sometimes people, when they're doing things they absolutely love, their hobbies or their work or whatever, they're in total flow. Or when we're in conversation with friends, we're in flow, so there's no conceptual mind playing, and that's when we sense and feel that connection. Now, that is possible anytime, regardless to what is going on in what we would call the outside world. It's not dependent on that. The outside world is not creating our connection or not creating our connection. Because sometimes you can be very close to people, very proximate to people, and not feel connection at all. You can feel the opposite. You can feel disconnection. And sometimes you can be miles away, continents away from someone, and feel totally connected. And we, as we nowadays are using more and more video calls and messaging, we can still have a virtual intimacy with people. We can have a connection even though we're not proximate, because the connection pre-exists our form of self. So the thing to get curious about and to explore is, when do you feel connection and when do you not? And as you do that, just get curious as to know what your conceptual personal mind is up to when you're feeling connection. Now, just bear in mind that we are so conditioned to think that connection has come because of something someone said or someone did or an event, that's where we're going to look first. So our mind will try and justify our sense of connection by those external reasons. But the thing to get curious about is when it's there without those reasons. They might look like the exceptions to the rule, but the more and more you explore that, you can start to see and feel that it's there anyway. And the variable to look at is not what the other person's up to, the other people are up to, or what the world's up to. It's where your own aperture is to mind, and how much sort of personal, separate self-thinking you have versus not. And the moments you don't, and your aperture is wider and more expansive, then you'll feel more connection. And it's nothing to do with whether we're isolated or not. Of course, we've been conditioned to sense more connection when we're around other people, and there is an element that we are social beings and we love the company of others. I'm not denying that at all. Of course we are. That's how we procreate, and that's how we have a synergistic value of working together. However, that is not the causal factor for it. We're inclined to want to socialize and be with people, of course we are, but that is not causal to us feeling connection. Anyway, I hope this little podcast has been helpful. I realise it might be one you might want to listen to 2 or 3 times. But as usual, have fun being curious, and let us know any thoughts or comments or observations, and please share it if you think it'd be useful. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, stay curious.